Richard Thornton was the kind of man whose presence made rooms go silent. As the CEO of Kingsley Enterprises, he commanded not just respect but fear. His empire touched every corner of the business world, real estate, technology, and global finance, and his name appeared in every business magazine. But what people remembered most was not his wealth, but his coldness. To Richard, mistakes weren't just errors, they were insults, signs of weakness, and proof of mediocrity. He had built his empire on the belief that there was no room for imperfection. It was a bitterly cold winter evening when Richard left his top-floor office and stepped into the glass elevator. Below him, the city glistened with 1,000 lights, the streets wet from a recent snowfall. The lobby, with its high marble walls and golden accents, shone like a palace. Yet as Richard's polished shoes clicked against the flawless floor, his sharp eyes caught something, a streak. A faint, ugly smear cut across the marble, catching the light in all the wrong ways. For any ordinary person, it would have been invisible, insignificant. But to Richard, it was an offense. His jaw tightened. He pressed the intercom on the lobby desk. "Find me the janitor. Now." Within minutes, Samuel was ushered into the grand office on the top floor. The man looked tired, his gray uniform damp at the knees, his mop still dripping from the bucket he had been pushing when the order came. His hands were rough, cracked from years of labor, and his back was slightly bent from decades of bending over floors, sinks, and windows. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, his expression carved in stone. 10 years, Samuel," he began, his voice sharp, 10 years in this building, and you still can't do your job properly. One streak. One careless swipe. That's all it takes to make this company look unprofessional." Samuel lowered his eyes, his lips pressing tightly together. His pride ached, but his silence was all he could offer. Richard picked up a silver pen from his desk and twirled it between his fingers. "This company," he said, his tone cold, "does not tolerate incompetence. You're finished here. Effective immediately." The words hit Samuel like a hammer. He felt his chest tighten as the weight of reality pressed down on him. He had known this day might come. Everyone whispered about how ruthless the CEO was, but he had hoped, prayed, that his hard work would be enough. He thought about his rent, the bills piling up on the kitchen counter, and most of all, his daughter. His daughter who waited for him every night with a plate set aside at their small kitchen table. Still, Samuel said nothing. To beg would only worsen his humiliation. He stood frozen, gripping the handle of his mop like a soldier holding the last weapon he had. Richard signed the paper in front of him with one swift motion, then slid it across the desk. "Security will escort you out. Collect your things." The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of the pen clattering against the glass desk. And then, the elevator doors slid open. A small figure appeared at the entrance, her footsteps hesitant on the glossy floor. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. In her arms she clutched a teddy bear, worn and patched from years of love. In her tiny hands, she carried a paper bag, folded neatly at the top. Her eyes, wide and innocent, darted around the enormous office before settling on her father. "Daddy," she whispered. Samuel spun around, his breath catching. "Lily, what are you doing here?" The little girl took a few steps forward, her voice trembling. I wanted to surprise you. I brought dinner." She held up the paper bag, its edges darkened by the warmth of whatever food was inside. Her lip quivered when she saw the tension in the room. Richard's cold eyes flicked to the child, then back to Samuel. "Who is this?" he demanded. Samuel swallowed hard. "My daughter." The CEO tapped his fingers against the desk impatiently. "She shouldn't be here. Security." But before he could finish, the child ran forward, placing herself between her father and the man behind the desk. Her small frame trembled, but she stood tall, her little chin raised as if she were facing down a giant. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her voice, though soft, rang with courage. "Please don't take my daddy away," she pleaded. The room froze. Even the security guards, standing at the door, shifted uncomfortably. Richard frowned. "What are you talking about?" Lily's little chest rose and fell as she tried to be brave. Her tiny hand slipped into her father's, squeezing it tightly. She looked up at the CEO with an innocence that cut sharper than any accusation. Then she said the words that would change everything. "He's my hero, always." The words hung in the air, fragile yet unbreakable. Richard blinked, caught off guard, the pen still hovering in his hand. For the first time in years, his ironclad heart hesitated. He looked at Samuel, not as an employee, not as a janitor, but as a man, as a father. He saw the rough hands, the weary shoulders, and the silent strength that came from years of sacrifice. And then his gaze shifted to the child. The love in her eyes was raw, unconditional, and pure. Something stirred deep inside him, something he thought he had buried long ago. Memories he had locked away behind walls of steel and ambition. A different time, when he had once held a father's hand. When he had once looked up and whispered the very same words, "My dad is my hero." The sound of Lily's voice echoed through him, breaking the armor he had spent a lifetime building. And for the first time in decades, Richard Thornton, the untouchable, unfeeling billionaire, felt something real. The office had never been so quiet. The hum of the city outside, the ticking of the golden clock on the wall, even the steady breath of the security guards, all of it seemed to fade into nothingness after Lily's words pierced the air. Richard stood frozen, the pen still in his hand. His empire, his billions, his reputation, all of it suddenly felt meaningless compared to the trembling little girl standing before him. He leaned forward slowly, his cold eyes softening for the first time in years. "Why," he asked in a voice that was no longer steel but almost human, "do you call him a hero?" Lily blinked through her tears, her tiny voice carrying a weight that shook the room. "Because he works so hard," she whispered. "He cleans floors when everyone else is asleep. He makes sure I have food, even when he doesn't eat. He never complains, even when he's tired or sick. Heroes don't wear capes, they take care of you no matter what." Her small hand tightened around her father's calloused fingers, and she added, with absolute certainty, "He's my hero, always." Samuel bowed his head, ashamed that his daughter had to speak such truths. His throat burned, but no words came. He had tried his best to shield Lily from his struggles, from the nights he went to bed hungry, from the mornings he fought back pain in his joints just to keep mopping the endless floors. Yet here she was, standing in front of the most powerful man in the building, telling his story better than he ever could. Richard's chest tightened. He turned away abruptly, striding toward the massive glass window that overlooked the city. His reflection stared back at him, sharp suit, polished shoes, a man who had conquered the world. But behind his own eyes, he suddenly saw something else. He saw a boy with torn shoes, holding his father's grease-stained hand outside a broken-down workshop. A boy who had whispered the same words to his own father, "You're my hero, always." His father had been a mechanic, his hands perpetually covered in oil, his back aching from long hours. Yet he had always found time to smile at his son, to teach him how to hold a wrench, to tell him stories about a brighter future. That boy had once loved his father more than anything. Until the day poverty swallowed their family whole. Richard had sworn never to live in weakness again. He had clawed his way out, brick by brick, deal by deal, and in the process, he had buried his childhood, his father's memory, under a mountain of ambition. And now, decades later, a little girl's trembling words had dug it all up. Richard pressed a hand to the glass, his jaw tight, his chest heaving. For the first time in years, he felt something warm prick at his eyes. He turned back. Samuel still stood stiffly, his eyes lowered in shame, while Lily clung to him, her tiny body shaking with fear that her plea hadn't worked. Richard walked back slowly, each step echoing in the vast office. He stopped in front of Samuel. The billionaire's gaze was no longer that of a ruthless ruler, but of a man wrestling with something far greater than pride. "You're not fired," he said at last. Samuel's head jerked up, disbelief flooding his face. Lily gasped, hugging her father tightly. But Richard wasn't finished. He placed a firm hand on Samuel's shoulder. "In fact, from this day forward, you will no longer just mop floors. You will be head of facilities. Your dedication, your sacrifice, deserves far more than I've given you." Samuel's mouth opened, but no words came. His throat constricted with emotion, his vision blurring with tears he hadn't shed in years. All he could do was nod, his voice stolen by gratitude. Lily squealed, hugging her father's waist with all the strength her little arms could muster. "Daddy, did you hear? You did it." Samuel bent down, pressing his forehead against hers, his tears wetting her hair. For once, he didn't care who saw. The security guards exchanged glances, their hardened expressions softening. Even the assistant standing in the corner discreetly wiped at her eyes. The ice around Richard's empire was melting, and everyone in the room could feel it. But for Richard, it wasn't just about Samuel. It was about the boy he had once been, the father he had once adored, and the part of himself he had buried. He cleared his throat, his voice low. "Samuel, when she called you a hero, I remembered something. My father was just like you. He worked himself to the bone for me. I forgot that. I forgot him. Don't ever let me forget again." Samuel's eyes widened. It was the first time anyone had seen Richard Thornton speak with such vulnerability. Richard knelt slightly, lowering himself to Lily's level. The little girl stepped back uncertainly, clutching her teddy bear. He gave her a small, almost hesitant smile. "You're right. Heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes, they carry mops." Lily giggled softly, her fear melting into joy. Richard reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a card, and handed it to Samuel. "This is my personal line. If you or your daughter ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. Do you understand?" Samuel nodded again, still unable to speak. His hand shook as he accepted the card, the weight of the moment nearly overwhelming him. Richard straightened, his steel mask returning, though softer this time. He turned to his assistant. "Effective immediately, increase salaries for all janitorial and maintenance staff. They've been invisible for too long." The assistant, stunned, nodded quickly, scribbling notes with trembling hands. As Richard walked toward the elevator, he heard Lily's little voice one last time. "Thank you, mister." He paused, his hand hovering over the elevator button. He didn't turn around, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. For the first time in decades, Richard Thornton, the billionaire who thought he had everything, felt a strange sense of fullness in his chest. Because tonight, he had been reminded of something no empire could ever buy: the priceless power of love, sacrifice, and the words of a child. When the elevator doors closed behind him, the city lights still sparkled outside. But for Richard, it wasn't the glow of glass towers or the shine of profits that mattered anymore. It was the echo of 4 simple words: "He's my hero, always," that would forever change the way he lived, led, and remembered his own father. And so, the man who once tried to fire a janitor walked out of his empire that night with more than money or power. He walked out with a softened heart and a vow never to forget the lesson a little girl had given him: sometimes, the truest heroes are the ones the world overlooks.